Hi, I'm Yinka, and this is The Hurt Locker, a podcast where we open a door into men's mental health. Coming up.
Well, it's generational trauma. And I think I wanted to use that term because of not just the sort of cultural trauma that I think I've hinted at a little bit from what I've said already, but also generational in terms of my direct family as well and the experiences that they've had as well, because I think they interweave and interconnect.
You're listening to The Hurt Locker, the podcast that opens a door on men's mental health. And tonight's guest, we have Edward Tripp. Edward, welcome to The Hurt Locker.
Hello. Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's been a busy day, but in a good way. So yeah, feeling happy to be here.
Okay, good. How's the start of summer been for you?
It's been good. It's been fine. I've been gigging quite a lot, doing a lot of festivals and things. It was the sort of summer festival time, I suppose. So it's been busy. Yeah, done some new gigs, been to some new places, met some new people. So yeah, it's a good start to the summer. I'm having a bit of a break now, but gearing up to a tour in the autumn. So I'm on a kind of a bit of a pause at the moment.
Okay, we'll talk more about that. For the benefit of our listeners, this is a re-record, as it were. You know, our sound quality wasn't that hot the first time around, so we're doing it now, but hopefully it'll just flow nice and easy. And Ed, is it okay to call you Ed?
Yeah, you can call me Ed. That's absolutely fine.
Okay. Thanks for taking the time out to be on The Hurt Locker. Do I detect in your a little lilt in your accents?
You do, yeah. It's a Northern Irish lilt, which is well detected. Some people think, rarely Northern Ireland, actually. Some people think Scottish or even Canadian. I get that sometimes. But yes, originally from Northern Ireland. Yeah, moved over here well over 20 years ago, more than that. But yeah, I've lived in Devon for a while now.
Okay, so Devon's your place then. Okay, nice. We'll talk a bit more about where you're currently living now. Can we take you right back?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right back. How was Northern Ireland for you growing up as a kid?
Northern Ireland that's a really interesting question. I mean, personally, growing up in Northern Ireland, it didn't really become a massive topic of discussion for me until I actually left Northern Ireland, which might sound a bit odd, but I came over to study at Plymouth University many years ago, 98 to 2001. So quite a while back. But the way I often describe it, I mean, I only really realised how kind of constricted that life and that lifestyle was in Northern Ireland when I moved away from it. And when I kind of moved to a place where I realised that there was a kind of different set of rules and there were far fewer restrictions. And I think to live that was a bit of a shock, actually. And I think only when I experienced those sorts of freedoms, I realised how restricted things used to be. But I often say, you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but you kind of only know what you know. And I think it became an issue, or it started to bring up questions when I was away, and there was a contrast, and it made me think.
Okay. What kind of restrictions did you experience growing up then?
It's interesting. When I speak to other people from Northern Ireland, they may sound like incredibly minor things, but things like, so where I grew up, for example, I mean, you might be aware that there would be certain places that would be designated a kind of a nationalist or a loyalist place. So certain pubs would be kind of restricted if you were from a kind of a Catholic background, which I was from. But it even extended to things like, you know, routes home that you would walk, taxi companies that you might hire to bring you home. Some were more prepared to drive through kind of, you know, as it were, mixed areas than others. So there were all sorts of divisions that you just learned. You know, it wasn't you know, it didn't feel particularly different or traumatic. You just kind of got on with it. So I think being away from that, being a student and not having those restrictions kind of just made you a little bit drunk on freedom, to be honest. And I do speak to a lot of people from Northern Ireland who acknowledge that sort of shift, that mental shift when it arrives.
I mean, growing up then, I'm assuming it's kind of implicit that you don't go to certain areas, or you stay away from certain areas, or you feel safe in this particular area.
Yeah, I mean, it is a real mixture. I mean, you get a vibe, but you are also told explicitly which areas to go to and which areas not to go to. There are also some handy guides as well. And if anyone's ever visited Northern Ireland, I mean, I don't think this is as much of an issue now, but obviously there are a hallmark, like the presence of flags and murals is often a good guide, or curbstones as well. So curbstones will be painted either green, white, and orange, or red, white, and blue in certain areas, so you know which paths and roadways that you're on. And I've heard lots of stories of friends who maybe had a few too many to drink and find themselves walking in an area where the curbs tell them that they're in the wrong area and they need to sort of find a way out quickly. But yes, all sort of little indicators and codes if it's not that obvious.
The curbstone's a new one to me. I was never aware of that. The flags, yeah.
Yeah. The curbstones, it's an interesting one. Like I said, I don't see them as often, so every now and again I'll go back and I'll see them, or I'll kind of take note. But that would tend to be more in slightly more, I suppose, areas that were less built up. So if it was less obvious where you were on the edges of sort of housing estates and things, that would often act as a guide.
Tell me, raised a Catholic.
Yeah.
Was your faith important to you?
Oh, crikey. That's a good question. I mean, I'm using the term raised a Catholic quite carefully. I mean, I don't practice a religion. I mean, I would say probably growing up, I was, I would say that I was quite devout, I suppose. And there are definitely there's some elements of growing up in quite a kind of faith-driven culture that, I did appreciate. And I mean, there are certain elements that I kind of am thankful for. There's a certain, reliance on sort of structure and, having a rhythm to your life and routine. Also very open, constant. This is a very Catholic thing as well, but always very open and constant conversations around death and mortality. A very kind of open, and
Honestly.
Oh yeah, constantly, and it's expressed in loads of different ways. I mean, Catholic churches are quite, lots and lots of imagery of suffering. Jesus in various states of suffering, but also the culture of going to wakes as well and funerals and open coffin worship. And Catholics would, an Irish Catholic wake would be quite a lively thing as well.
Yes.
I often joke that I've probably seen more dead bodies than the average person, just in terms of kind of open casket celebrations before funerals and things. So that element is quite an interesting one. I don't really feel restrained talking about kind of mortality and things like that. I think that's just a strange kind of offshoot. But I suppose, prayer and things like that. I mean, I guess engage in a version of prayer or meditation, but I think that's still really important. That's something that I try and kind of build in each day.
Okay. So that's a meditation, prayer, a daily thing then?
Yeah, it would be. And, sometimes that can just simply take the form of having some calm, reflective time, but that's sort of built into the way of structuring your day. So, yeah.
Tim's just put in the chat, Catholic, that phrase comes back to me.
Catholic, yeah. I know we talked about this with the first recording, but that's a phrase my wife has coined. I've actually written a poem with that title in it. But
can you recite it?
Can I recite it? Oh, I could probably recite bits of it, but the title of the poem is Catholicism, just for clarity. So that's kind of, that refers to me liking to talk about, clearly, growing up in a faith-based culture, but not actually worshipping in the same way. But yeah, I guess that's what that phrase covers.
Cool. a bit controversial, this question, or possibly. No, let me just say this one. I always find it interesting, and you spoke about that death would be part and parcel of conversations. And I always find it interesting that we're here because of intimacy. We're all going to die. Yet they appear to be sex and death appear to be the two taboo subjects, unless you're from Ireland, as it were.
Yes, I could relate to that expression for sure.
So my question I was going to say or ask of you is, what is the future for Ireland?
Oh, crikey. There is a very kind of, I think, practical response to that question. I mean, it's a little bit controversial, but I mean, just to be open and honest, there is a view, and this is, I don't know how live this view still is, because obviously I've still got family in Northern Ireland, but there is a view that there will be a time when there will be another vote, and that this is the idea, isn't it? That if enough of the population in Northern Ireland want to have a vote on independence, that they can have that if enough people do want it. And there is a feeling that might be inevitable, given the way things are shifting politically. So I think that might be an interesting thing to observe. I personally, I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think it's been interesting to watch how much Northern Ireland has changed in terms of opportunities and in terms of its development and employment. Growing up where I grew up, it was there were definitely still issues and problems with terrorism. This was pre-Good Friday Agreement,
Yes.
and there were definitely far fewer opportunities. So I think given that there are more opportunities for people to do different things, get a job, improve themselves, I think that generationally, younger people will be more interested in doing that than in getting embroiled in historic arguments over kind of land and territory and things like that. So we shall see. We shall see how that goes. But I do admit that I did kind of find those sort of circular arguments about territory, religion, culture just a bit exhausting. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way to kind of family and friends who still live in Northern Ireland, but I did definitely, with me, it reached a point where I just needed to kind of experience different things.
I can echo that. When I was in Belfast earlier this year and again last year, I got a sense from the younger people that they didn't have an appetite for any type of violence, whatever side of the divide they were on, and that they wanted to be more progressive in the thoughts moving forward for their country, etc.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, let's see where it goes. I mean, I think that there are still obviously big challenges ahead, and I am hopeful. I mean, ultimately, I am hopeful. Also, because I still have family in Northern Ireland, I want things to go really well. But it's it's an ongoing debate, but one that I'm hopeful about.
I'm just reminded of when I was in a cove in Cork, and I remember meeting a black guy there, and as what us black guys did, we'll acknowledge somebody even if we don't know them, But as we started getting into a conversation, and I asked him where he was from, and he said he was from Sierra Leone. And I thought, wow, what's made you come here? And he said he came for peace. He just wanted the peace. And I've noticed across Ireland as well, the increasing diversity that's there. How do you think Ireland's embraced that, or is embracing it?
It's another really, really interesting question. I would say it's a much more diverse place than it used to be. It is so interesting, though, I know there is a lot of kind of tension in some parts of Northern Ireland at the minute, with concerns and anxieties around people from different countries, and there were some high-profile kind of riots around some people from other countries accused. I think things got out of control and things got very frenzied. I mean, there are definitely there are still echoes of people, in my view, can't really leave that old way behind. They are used to living in a kind of divided community. And I think when they have fewer opportunities, it's so easy to fall back into that mindset. It's so easy to fall back into those old patterns, because they are used to growing up in that divided environment. So I think it's very easy to kind of trigger that quite quickly,
Yes.
quite rapidly, as we've seen. But I think there is an element of people not having quite moved on from how things used to be, and almost feeling that's part of their identity, I suppose, to kind of be suspicious about outsiders, or to be paranoid about their status within a community, because it's already kind of quite damaged or quite fractured from what's happened in the past.
Thank you for that. Tell me, recently we've seen Kneecap in the news. What are your thoughts on them?
Weirdly, I thought that was going to come up today.
Well, that's so
I
nice,
just had this feeling, and I've kind of followed a little bit. I followed a little bit about it. God, I've got a variety of views. I mean, firstly, when I did the Edinburgh Fringe last year, and I hadn't actually heard of them until last year, and I was doing a venue. It was there was my show that I did during the day, but I got sort of adopted by this other show that specialized in kind of Irish performers. And I went there every single day after my show, and they had Kneecap blaring out on the speakers into the street. And I think they were kind of using that music to filter the right people into the show, if you know what I mean. So Kneecap became the sort of anthem for Edinburgh. I mean, I like the music. I think clearly they're very, very outspoken. I think one of the interests, and I'm not just saying this to sound neutral, but just to pick something quite relatively innocent, but I think it's so interesting the impact they're having on the Irish language. And I understand that the uptake and the interest in the Irish language and speaking Irish has soared because of their influence. And I just did not see that coming. That really was the last thing I thought would emerge culturally. I mean, clearly they're dealing with some incredibly politically volatile themes and ideas. And without sort of starting an even bigger debate, I mean, my view is provocative musicians, you look at sort of punk music. I mean, that was always kind of the function of that music, to be provocative and to, stand up to authority. So I don't think, in some ways, I don't think that's really changed. I don't think that's a new thing. Well, that's just what I think anyway.
Okay. Do you think that they're a force for good?
I think it really does. It really does depend on your perspective. I mean, I know my brother is massively into them and their music and their story. I haven't really followed them that much. People have repeatedly told me that I need to watch the film for various reasons. I haven't seen the film, but I think what they're talking about at the minute politically is stuff that needs to be talked about, and I think they're not letting go of their views, and I think they're certainly keeping things afloat in terms of that discussion. But I don't know a huge amount about them as a band and where they're from, but I do want to watch the film. Maybe I might be more enlightened after that.
Yes. One point you mentioned there in terms an upsurge in terms of the Irish language. What's your Irish like?
Awful. I mean, I don't. I mean, it was one of those languages we did have to. We're taught Irish at school. I mean, it was kind of compulsory. But again, I think that was quite a sort of a very blatantly kind of political thing. So there wasn't much in the same way that kids these days for the GCSEs they're forced to either learn French or German or something. It was either Irish or Irish if you were from a Catholic school. But I don't know. I kind of resisted it a bit just because it was being kind of shoved at me. But I think that's just a normal teenage thing to do, isn't it? A bit, just to reject what you're being told to do.
Well, I guess you're going to have to subscribe to Duolingo then, aren't you?
Quite possibly, yeah.
Can I ask, are you a patriot? Whatever that means.
Am I a patriot? Oh my goodness. I'm very proud of where I'm from. Definitely very proud of where I'm from. I think for me, it's more coming from I did come from an incredibly working class family culturally. And, I kind of did the 11 plus and the uni thing. And I just really, really focused and knuckled down on what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. I probably would have said, if I was in my kind of late teens, early 20s, I wasn't patriotic in the slightest and kind of couldn't wait to get out of that environment. I'd say with the benefit of age and maybe more maturity, I'm a lot easier on that. I mean, I will go home whenever there's me referring it to as home. Isn't that interesting?
That's
But
interesting.
whenever I do go back to Northern Ireland, I do feel like I'm sort of kind of walking around a museum in a way that I'm not really part of it, that I'm just sort of looking back at it. My siblings sometimes will do this, actually. We'll go back, visit family, and then go back to where we grew up and sort of walk around a bit like tourists, just slightly detached and sort of fascinated by everything. But like I say, when I left Northern Ireland, it was a slightly, what the actual departure going to university was quite a traumatic time in itself. So I would say around that time, I just couldn't wait to go and start something new.
Okay. Republic of Ireland play Northern Ireland in the World Cup final. Who do you support?
I mean, I would have to say Northern Ireland, I suppose. Crikey. It's so interesting because I just know within my broader family, and I've got a massive family. I mean, that question could elicit all sorts of different responses. It's such a loaded question, isn't it? But I suppose I would have to recognize that. I mean, and it's interesting on my, someone asked me recently, that why on my profile on social media I describe myself as a Northern Irish poet and not as an Irish stand-up poet. And it was a really good question because I didn't actually have a very straight answer to it. I think it's probably because I do touch a bit on kind of politics and where I'm from when I perform. So I think adding Northern to the Northern Irish bit just provokes a bit of debate or a bit of discussion. Oh, he's from Northern Ireland, is he? I wonder why he specified that. Yeah. So I think I probably do that just to be a bit provocative, I suppose. Interestingly, though, my passport is up for renewal, and for the first time, I have a choice of whether to, because at the minute I've got a British passport because I'm lazy and I've never changed it. But I get to choose now whether I have an Irish passport or whether I have dual citizenship, which I can do. So I have to make that decision.
Where are you leaning to?
I think, do you know what? I'm leaning towards having two passports, having a British passport and an Irish passport. I kind of want to also get this process in motion for my kids. I want them to have Irish passports. I want them to be European again. And I think that's the bit that I'm probably more interested in.
Yes.
In being identified as European again. That was a bit gut-wrenching when that all happened.
Course.
But it would actually technically mean that because my children can apply for an Irish passport because of the edict of the Good Friday Agreement, means my wife can't have one. So there's a different division. No. Well, she would have to. There are certain conditions attached. I think she would have to live in Ireland for a certain number of years to qualify for one. So there are certain loops that she would have to kind of jump through. But I'm saying it with a smile on my face. But there is part of me that does feel quite sad that, like, there is like a little virtual division has leapt up inside my family because of the politics of this. Yes. And, I might be in a situation where, me and the kids identify one way culturally and there's a separation from my wife. I think practically it just means we queue in slightly different ways at the airport, but But you know what I mean? It's sort of,
Yeah.
it feels a bit, it doesn't feel right. Grates to me a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. You're on the Hurt Locker, and so I'm going to take a little dive in. Oh, let me go back a little bit. When you said when you go home, it's a bit like a museum. You're walking around. How does that feel within the body?
It feels, I do feel a bit kind of detached from it, like it's a bit dreamlike. So it doesn't, for me, it doesn't quite feel real. It feels a bit dreamy, and I think that's something that that's something my siblings would also describe. I think they describe it in a similar way. Yeah, not quite in reality.
When you mentioned that, I went to. I don't know if you've ever been to the Dead Museum in Dublin.
No.
Wow, it's around by Queen's University, and it's the most gruesome museum I've ever seen in my life because it's before people understood how to stuff animals. So you've got animals from all over the world in there, and it's like it's just you have to go to
It's
experience
right up
it.
my street. Yeah.
You have to go and experience it. You're on the Hurt Locker, so take a deep dive in. Edward, what's in your Hurt Locker?
I mean, I think we said at the start that this is round two of the recording, and there was a term that I kind of raised, and I think it's the same term I'd like to use this time.
Go for it.
Well, it's generational trauma, and I think and like I said last time, I think I wanted to use that term because of not just the sort of cultural trauma that I think I've hinted at a little bit from what I've said already, but also generational in terms of my direct family as well, and the experiences that they've had as well, just personally, and growing up in that kind of culture too, because I think they interweave and interconnect. But I think that would be what I would present.
Could you unpick that for us a little bit, please, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no problem. I think, I mean, you talked a little bit about people growing up in that culture, some moving on and some not moving on.
Yes.
And one of the things that I'm really, really passionate for people who haven't grown up in that culture to understand is how destructive not having opportunities can be, and how destructive boredom actually can be. And I don't think it's necessarily just applicable to Northern Ireland. I think any war zone or any conflict area where, you know, the infrastructure falls apart and you're dealing with disaffected young people, not always necessarily young men, but invariably young men who want to belong to something.
Absolutely.
If you extract that kind of infrastructure, if you extract opportunity, they'll want to belong to something. And I think it needs to be understood that I think was one of the fueling forces for younger people joining and getting involved in terrorism and the response to being colonized. But you know, that's a whole other topic. But definitely there are echoes of that bleach into families that I still know today. And I did talk about last time that the number of young men, particularly young men who would have been my age, friends of mine growing up, who sadly have taken their own lives. I used to hang around with a sort of a posse of 6 or 7 friends, and you know, 3 of them have been affected by suicide. 1 attempt, 2 successful attempts, which sounds perverse, but they would have been my age now. And I think what kind of connects them is the fact that they perhaps didn't, for various reasons, move away from that culture, but also I think they were connected to a kind of generational trauma in terms of where they grew up, and there's lots of unhealed pain that I think fuels those feelings. I think that statistics, sadly, for particularly young men and suicide in Northern Ireland is pretty extraordinary. I think it is still one of the worst, if not the worst, areas in the UK at present. Really, really alarming statistics. So I do reflect on that sometimes. I mean, there's always the question of where I would be, or how I would feel if I hadn't moved to a different place, or kind of extracted myself from where I grew up, how things would have been different. So, those questions come back.
I mean, when you've lost friends, you mentioned losing 2 friends to suicide. How have you reflected that internally for yourself?
I mean, I should say, I mean, and I mean this with all respect and love for them and their families. I mean, these would have been friends I would have naturally sort of drifted away from over the years. I mean, these would have been my friends when I was like 6 or 7, and
Yes.
literally we would have just, so not to say that we would have been bosom buddies up until the point
Yeah.
when they sadly went. But in terms of how I kind of reflect on it, I mean, I suppose that, like you say, there is always that question of whether or not what happened to them was inevitable, whether, was it just this recipe of growing up in a culture that is still quite raw and unhealed? How much of what happened to them was a result of them, feeling like they didn't have, opportunities, or didn't have a kind of
Disenfranchised.
choices. Yeah, disenfranchised, absolutely. Completely disenfranchised through no fault of their own. So yeah, that those queries can rear up. And
Do you feel kind of guilty in a way, being removed from?
yeah, I mean, I'd say so. And I'm kind of, I mean, my brother definitely was much closer to certainly one of our friends. I mean, he would have been a joint friend, and he did go back, and he did connect with the family again. And I kind of every now and again think, oh, should I have been part of that? So I kind of, there is an element of that, I do reflect on every now and again. But I think the other reason it sort of hits me is because, whenever we would have been friends, it would have been around the time, because I've got a young teenage son. It probably would have been around the time when, I was his age. So I don't know, just seeing your kids grow up, you kind of are forced to reflect on how you were doing things at their age. And you kind of do find yourself saying to your kids, when I was your age, I was doing this, that, and the other. So I think that fuels it a little bit as well. You're kind of constantly reflecting on how you grew up when you're trying to kind of help your kids grow up.
Do you talk to your son about your experiences, your lived experiences?
I do, yeah. I have a daughter too who's at university, and she's really she's probably more curious, more interested in than my son, just because she's studying sociology. But I do speak very openly and very freely with them. I talk about things that happened when I was growing up, and I mean, there were, my hometown was, Lurgan was pretty much flattened in 1992 by a very large bomb, and there are definitely people, friends of friends who were murdered as well, and sometimes I share those stories with them when they ask questions, when they're curious. I think, to be honest with you, I think that they're almost as shocked, and it sounds like I'm probably joking here, but they're almost as shocked to hear things like, I mean, literally how I would spend my time pre-social media and mobile phones. It makes me sound so old, but when I talk to them about, literally disappearing for a day on my bike, of the weekend, and not being in contact with parents until the end of the day. I mean, they're almost as shocked by that than the other details that I share with them. But yeah, they are definitely much more curious, and they do ask lots of questions, and I'm very, very happy to answer them
Cool.
in the right kind of way. My son also does a cracking Northern Irish accent. He does repeat me every now and again. There's certain catchphrases he likes to use that he throws back at me. So, that's what I have to live with.
Last week, the UK government announced that starting in September 2026, suicide prevention and grief education will be included in the school curriculum for the first time ever. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
Is this is across the UK? This isn't focused on any particular area.
Yeah,
I think that's amazing, and I don't think it's, well, it is a coincidence. I've just mentioned sort of social media and stuff, but genuinely, I think this obviously is a positive example of how social media can kind of create meaningful discussions. But I'm very, very conscious as a father, and with kids with access to social media, that it can be a fuel source for separation and isolation. And I think for that reason alone, it's a really, really good piece of news to hear that, and to hear that it's being discussed and will be discussed openly in the classroom. I think that's very encouraging.
Have you ever had to ask any of your children about, are they experiencing suicidal ideation?
I've kind of spoken candidly with the kids before about social media and about their experience of it, and I remember watching something on the news where, some horrific fact about the percentage of young people who'd seen like incredibly violent content appear on their phone or shared with them, and I both just turned to them and asked if they'd experienced that. Partially,
What was their response?
Immediately, yes, that they had. And I kind of did ask them in a slightly tongue-in-cheek way, because I really didn't expect that to be the answer. So, yeah, I was shocked that that was the response, and that I didn't see that coming. So, I do make sure to kind of ask them and keep checking in with them.
Are you afraid to say the word suicide, or it doesn't bother you?
It doesn't bother me. No. It's like, I think it needs to be, it's still clearly a massive, massive taboo.
Yes.
And I think, certainly, I guess growing up where I grew up, I think it's also the other kind of barrier to it is it's probably not seen as a particularly macho thing to talk about, feeling how you feel and feeling potentially quite desperate. And I think as well, growing up, machismo was a really big, again, another fuel for young men wanting to be part of something or part of bigger ideas. So it's a pretty toxic cocktail, isn't it? It's kind of wanting to belong, but also that same fuel, meaning that they can't maybe talk about things that they want to talk about. Yeah.
I still remember the days of when they would talk advertising about cancer, and they'd never say the word, they'd say the big C.
Yeah.
But now it's all over the place. Macmillan is all over the place. Talking about cancer is all over the place. And I think that's the step in the journey that we need to be going through with talking about suicide as well. Because it feels like to mention it is a taboo, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know from one of the particular friends who passed away, he had a young family, and, the ripples of that will sadly pass into another generation. So again, it's about, and they will clearly need to be able to have conversations about it as well.
Yes, definitely.
So the conversation needs to happen, preferably before, people reach that kind of breaking point.
It's and I don't make no apology for this, but when one person's being bereaved or affected by suicide, they join a high risk category group of 80 to 300% higher than the general population. Yes.
Right. So that's a pretty horrific cycle, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I didn't know that. That's a horrifying statistic.
Yeah. And the thing is, if we look at under 18s, more than 200 die by suicide each year. And that's only between the ages of 10 and 18. we don't account for kids under the age of 10. And I
Yeah,
always say this, if 200 people died in a football match, there'd be a government inquiry,
yeah,
yet
yeah.
200 kids are dying and nothing gets said.
Absolutely. They're just. I mean, it's almost like, yeah, they are dying, but I mean, the build up to that is almost like a slower kind of process. It's like death in slow motion, isn't it?
Yes,
And it's just looking out for those signs and
yes,
opening up that conversation as
yeah,
well. I'm really. I know that this is something that you've just mentioned, but really pleased that discussions about suicide and mental health will feature more in the curriculum, because I think the irony as well, with so many particularly younger people who might be failing at that kind of breaking point, is that talking about things with actual human beings uh, is kind of the opposite of what social media is fueling, really, isn't it? Because it's fueling more insular thought and kind of isolating you from other people. And I think that's definitely one of the ingredients for people becoming more and more isolated and insular, isn't it?
You mentioned transgenerational trauma, and I was with my son and I was listening to his tunes yesterday, and he's not into rap, but I heard this lyric, and the lyric was about a guy who was just freestyling, and he said, "We didn't invent rap. Society invented rap, and we just reflected our experiences of our life." And I thought, wow, that's powerful. That's
Yeah.
powerful. And I think, you spoke about isolation with social media and all that. It was originally everybody thought that it was about coming together, but it's fragmented societies, it's fragmented communities. It stopped people, particularly the younger generation, in my opinion, from being able to have eyeball to eyeball
Yeah.
conversations. You know, it stopped people from learning how to flirt.
It's really, really interesting. Yeah. I kind of, and also, I suppose, being creative and being playful and being kind of out in the open as well. Um,
Yes,
and I think, I was reading some horrible statistics about, kids not engaging in creative play anymore, and how that is kind of fueling more and more anxiety and a kind of an inability to connect with people. And I think, social media thinks it's kind of helping with that, but in actual fact, yeah, it's not. I think people clearly, the algorithms can help you find particular tribes who believe particular things, but they might not all necessarily be helpful things or add to the debate.
it's true. I mean, I've got loads of stuff from our previous conversation that I thought we were going to be able to talk about, but this conversation's took a different steer, as it were. Can I ask? You mentioned about experiencing a few things, and I'm reminded of our previous conversation. And you said it today. You couldn't wait to get out.
Yeah, yeah.
You couldn't wait to get out.
So whenever I did leave for uni, it was a kind of a double whammy for me. I mean, the decision to, I mean, I was looking at lots of different universities. I mean, Plymouth was one of them. There was, I was looking at Belfast, Dublin, but I was kind of, uh, I suppose, pushed in the direction of leaving and going to Plymouth and coming to Devon eventually, because of a particular summer that I had. And I think this kind of combines some of the things that we've mentioned. But I did have a girlfriend from a Protestant community, Protestant background, and it was during marching season, which will mean specific things to different people. But ultimately, it was a very heightened time, and she lived in a Protestant area, and some attention was shown on the fact that we were in a relationship, and I was kind of told in no uncertain terms that we couldn't connect. I couldn't kind of visit, and I wasn't welcome in certain parts of the city. And if I did, town where I grew up, and if I did breach that, I'd be in trouble. So I was effectively added to a list and kept under surveillance by a kind of a fringe organization. I never really got to the bottom of who it was, but I don't, and I should say, I don't mean like killed. I mean probably beaten up
Kneecaps.
or kneecap, to use that that term again. Yeah, and it's interesting. Some people who probably listen to the music of kneecap probably don't know about the origin of that phrase, but it literally would be the punishment that would involve having your kneecaps shattered or removed. Usually having them, sort of be graphic, but like blown off by a gun, back of the leg.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in that. I was in that category, and I just kind of reached a point where I thought, I kind of need to be out of this. And being followed, being surveilled was probably the tipping point. I kind of couldn't go anywhere without feeling incredibly paranoid or watched. So I decided to leave. And in the same week that I kind of made the decision, because of, this being added to this list, that's when within my own family something quite shocking happened. And I don't mind sharing. It was the news that my dad had been having a series of affairs that over years and years and years, that just absolutely kind of blew my mind. It really was the last thing that I thought was going to be revealed. I mean, there are elements of that story that I kind of probably not going to go into now because they're quite complex, and I know that some of my siblings are kind of dealing with it in slightly different ways and are at different stages of it.
Yeah.
But needless to say, someone who I thought I knew was not the person that I knew, and they've actually shown very, very little genuine remorse for, what happened. So I don't know. Having one of those things in a week would be bad enough, but to have both, it kind of almost fused together this. I mean, I use the term generational trauma. I mean, literally trauma within the family, trauma within the community. I thought, I'm out of here, and left for university.
You went to uni in '98, so you would have started September time, and I'm thinking the Good Friday Agreement was in April '98.
Yeah.
Can you recall back in April how you felt at that time about or its significance?
To be honest, I kind of didn't feel much. There is just because, and I don't mean that to sound kind of horrible, but I kind of, again, having lived in that environment, you just have this inbuilt cynicism about any kind of decision. I'm not saying, it was just me. I'm pretty sure that would have been, there's a sort of we'll believe it when we see it type mentality. Absolutely. But for me, actually, it was what happened in August of '98, and that was actually the Oma bombing. I'm pretty sure it was then. Apologies if I got that date wrong, which was the worst atrocity in terms of death toll. And that was literally at the point where I was leaving for university. So, you've had the events I've just described, and then this, which again the timing of it was unbelievable. But if there was a sort of a kind of a force that pushed me even faster, then it was probably that. But yes. again,
Tim's just confirmed you were right, 15th of August.
Yeah. So that would have been literally as I was kind of packing up. But again, the feelings of guilt that came with that too. I've kind of got an escape plan, and then this happens, and then you're flooded with all those what if questions, and yes. the people connected to what happened, because everyone knew someone connected to someone connected to someone who passed away. So yeah, heavy. It was a heavy time.
I can imagine. But at the same time, coming to the UK, going to university, how did you acclimatise to that? In fact, did you acclimatise straight away in that first year?
Not really. I went a bit wild, Yankee, to be honest with you. I had 3 years in Plymouth Uni. I studied fine art and just had the time of my life. It was great fun. Like
You're
I
saying
say,
that with a little smile on your face.
I know. It was honestly, the contrast was so huge. I am literally just reflecting, but I was just back in Plymouth there for a second.
What's the
And
first thing? What's the first thing that came to your mind then?
it was kind of just the chaos of moving into a big shared house that was full of people, but not my family. I had I'm one of 6 kids, so I've kind of went from one slightly crazy house to another one, but just a very different atmosphere. I'm what met Becky as well, who is now my wife. But we met whenever I went to university as well, and yeah, there's just some brilliant memories of that transition that I hold and reflect back on a lot.
Did you feel much palpably safer?
It took a while. It did take a while, definitely. There was definitely a period where I kind of thought, there was still an element of looking over your shoulder, because that wasn't actually that far away from that thing I mentioned about being sort of on the list. So, there was an element of me thinking, am I still under surveillance? But that did leave eventually. That kind of feeling of paranoia did sort of drift away gradually as I kind of got stuck into things, but yeah, quickly readjusted, I think.
You mentioned previously about family members coming to live close to where you live now.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you, being the frontiersman, as it were?
It's quite nice, actually. So I've got 4 sisters and 1 brother, and literally there was a period when one of my sisters came to visit, and she literally just never went home. My brother then came to visit. Exactly the same thing happened. He got into a relationship and just stayed, and so did my other sister. And then a little bit further along the line, one of my other sisters came and studied fine art at the uni I'd come to as well. She also stayed. So at the moment, it's really sweet because I got a brother in Bristol, a sister in Plymouth, and another sister quite close by in Devon. So yeah, a little network kind of formed gradually over the years, where literally half my family kind of are in kind of throwing distance, and the other half are back in sort of Belfast direction. But it's quite pleasing that it worked out that way.
You mentioned that your father's perhaps not showing any signs of remorse and that. Tell me about your mum.
I think whenever all of the revelations came to the surface, I think we all just developed, and I think I'm probably confident in saying this on behalf of our siblings. We just developed just a newfound respect for my mom, and like everything that then became revealed about everything that she'd been through. I mean, she had a deeply, deeply traumatic upbringing as well. I mean, she suffered. I mean, it's probably another podcast's worth of discussion. To be honest, it's horrendous kind of psychological and sexual abuse that she suffered, literally from all throughout her childhood. So, for her to then experience this, it's sort of round 2 of betrayal and trauma, was so tragic. But my mum is amazingly strong. She's definitely a survivor. She's incredibly sort of persistent, and she's got a real drive, and I think we all see that in her. She's also an incredibly witty and funny lady, and kind of does, she does see the funny side of things. We do chat on the phone a couple of times a week, and I do joke that I've got this little notepad beside the phone. I really do. I mean, there's some absolute gold that she comes out with. But yeah, she's an incredible lady. She's been through an unbelievable amount. And again, it almost feels like I'm deliberately hooking it back to the overarching trauma theme. But I think we could definitely all learn some lessons from the life that she's lived. But like I said, I think that's probably another story.
I would love to have you back on for that story.
Yeah, I think that would be, yeah, She
think
has a
you know
very
what
unique story.
you know what I'm thinking as well. I'm thinking through discussions and may even be quite cathartic for you as well.
I'd love to. Yeah, absolutely love to. I've really enjoyed this. I think, anything that continues the discussion would be very welcome.
It's easy for me to ask this question because, and you know the answer to it as well. But I'm going to pause now and then ask you now, do you fully embrace it? Who's the most important person in your life?
I would still say being the wife of a suffering artist / poet. I mean, Becky, who I met at university, who is now my wife, who's kind of seen all of those ups and downs and kind of understands the madness of trying to kind of make a career in the creative industry. Her support has been really invaluable. But I've got a feeling you might say something else.
I'm just going to say it's you because we've already recorded that as you. But can you embrace it?
That's very kind. That is very kind. That's a very nice thing to say. I'll have to kind of digest that a little bit.
Okay. I'll let you digest it until the next time we get together. Got a question from Damien, listener. He says, "Now you're an invader." Right.
Sounds like a Kneecap fan to me.
Yes,
anyway,
yeah. If you were still back in Northern Ireland, would you still be involved in the creative industries, or would you be doing something else?
Do you know, it is a really interesting question, and I would like to think I'd still be involved in maybe comedy and performance. I did have a conversation with a comedian that I met. I've always admired, but only got to meet them and have a proper chat with them a couple of months ago. And I think she's from Romania, and we talked about whether or not we'd ever gigged in our home country. And she said no. And I said no as well immediately. And then we laughed about it. But then we sort of picked it apart a bit. And I think in truth, a lot of the comedy, or a lot of what I think is the sort of funny bit, and I think she agreed with this as well, is being kind of other, of being out of the environment that you're originally from. So I think a lot of the comedy comes from being slightly out of place. So, I might still, if I hadn't left Northern Ireland, be involved in the creative industry, but I don't know whether it would be the same kind of stuff, the same kind of material, whether it would have the same vibe, because I'd still be within a familiar environment. So I think the tension of not being where I originated from, I think fuels that a little bit, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It makes perfect sense. And it was interesting for me using the word other. Earlier on, you'd mentioned going back home.
Yeah.
But where is home? Because going back home felt like, how did you describe it? Like dreamlike.
Yeah. I think that home is, I mean, again, this is probably a cliche, but it is the sort of, it's the people that surround you. It's the sort of, it's that psychological thing of finding your tribe, finding your like-minded people, and surrounding yourself with them. And I think I had an opportunity when I was extracted from where I originated from to create my own community around me, and it took me a long time to kick back into the swing of being creative and making art again. And I had to sort of build that back up, and once I'd sort of found my, the group that I belonged to, it felt great. It felt like I'd kind of, again, I'd remembered the mission. I'd remembered the reason I'd come over to uni. I'd remembered, why I'd made that leap, and it was to be creative and do it in a really creative environment with people who were like-minded. So I guess it's about people, isn't it? And maybe that's why going back to where I'm from in Northern Ireland feels maybe a bit detached and dreamy, because the people that made that community aren't really there anymore. They don't really add to it.
Is there a sense of loss with that? A sense of sadness with that?
I think there is a bit. I think there probably is a bit. But it's almost a bit like, I think it's like letting someone go. It's like letting an old person go or an old relative go. I mean, you can
this
be
is
a bit.
This is some full circular again, because we're talking about death here as well. And
we
loss.
are. And I think this might just be my Catholic programming, but yeah, it does feel like that, and I think that's probably what it feels like. You sort of, you're visiting someone who doesn't, maybe someone who can't quite register that you're there, maybe someone a bit older, a bit senile, and you're no longer there's no longer a connection, but you can still appreciate who they were. Yeah. I think that's what I'd say, if that's not too weird and cryptic.
No, not at all. Not at all. Edward, it's been a pleasure. But before you go, I need you to do a smooth criminal.
Oh, really? Would you like
yes.
me? Would you like me to do a poem, Yenka?
Yes, please.
Because
Yes,
we've mentioned, we have mentioned stand-up poetry, and I fully appreciate that. That might mean very, very little to anyone, but I'm very happy to perform for you one of the poems that appears in my Edinburgh show. It's called "No Man Is in Ireland."
Is that with you've been collaborating with Kev Mudd or Kev Mudd?
Oh no. So I do gig a lot with Kev Mudd. I do gig a lot with Kev Mudd. Yeah, I collaborate with loads of different people, and in fact, it was Kev who originally I kind of got connected to this podcast because I listened to his conversation and was really inspired by it, and I became a listener. So it was. But yeah, it's nice to give Kev a mention because he's a nice guy, and I gig with him. I do gig with him a lot. We're in a similar kind of orbit of gigs.
Okay. But mention it again, that play on words. No Man Is in Ireland.
No Man Is in Ireland is the name of Ireland, not Ireland, Ireland, and that's the name of my first book of poems, but also the name of the tour that I've been doing since Edinburgh. That I've been doing since Edinburgh last year, and I'm doing again this autumn. So, will I read you a poem from that?
Please do.
I'll do something short. Just because a lot of my stuff is quite rambly and dramatic, and I do in character. And most people who've seen me will know that this is not the Edward Tripp that appears on stage.
Absolutely.
So that's a very, very important thing to say. I mean, quite interestingly, this one, Yenka, is also about death.
Yeah, of course it is.
So, so this is my tribute to Auntie Annabelle. And I did recite this at her funeral because Auntie Annabelle, Yenka, had the perfect life, but also the perfect death. Okay? So that features in the poem. And it's simply called Auntie Annabelle. The one thing, though, you need to remember about Auntie Annabelle is that she was a massive, massive Michael Jackson fan. Okay? Okay, it goes like this. Auntie Annabelle loved the King of Pop. Despite the allegations, her love didn't stop. Such a kind, gentle soul, she'd often say, until the day she died. Her death was sublime. Her timing was too, as she lay on the floor of the care home loo. Those fateful last words she heard that day came from Michael, her nurse, as she heard him say, Annie, are you okay? Annie, are you okay? Are you okay, Annie? So that's the kind of vibe of the show. I think that probably sums up the level of maturity that people would experience.
Well,
even though.
So where can people see you?
So if they want to see me. So the actual next gig I have, bizarrely, is on the Isles of Scilly in 2 weeks.
How appropriate.
I'm doing it's called the Scilly Festival, and I think it's on oh crikey, I don't have the dates. I think it's from the 16th to the 18th, and I feature somewhere in there if people want to go on a boat. But if they don't want to do that and they want to see the autumn tour, to be honest with you, quite a few of the dates are floating and haven't been settled yet, but I'm probably going to do about 8 or 9 different venues. But the best thing to do is if people don't follow me on Instagram, maybe consider that, because I'll do a little tour poster quite soon to show off all of the dates for the autumn tour. That would probably be the easiest way.
How soon will you do that? Because this podcast will probably go out the 5th of August.
Oh, no, this won't happen until September. So, yeah, there's definitely time. It'll be from September till November.
I mean, the dates. When will people get to know?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good question. It should be shortly after the podcast, if not maybe a week or so after. But
okay, cool. We'll help wherever we can.
Oh, thank you so much,
Edward, Tripp. You've been gracious with your time, your lived experiences, and it's been boss to have you on the Hurt Locker. And hopefully, when you're less busy, we can have a part 3 to this.
I'd like that. Yeah,
you know?
That'd be loads of fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been great.
You've been listening to the Hurt Locker, and that's a wrap, Tim. The Hurt Locker is a safe space for our guests to openly share their mental health experiences. If you have been affected by any of the content in this recording, then please reach out for support. If it is an emergency, dial 999. If you would like to talk to somebody today, then please call the Samaritans on 116 123. Stay safe. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Hurt Locker. Please give us a rating or share with another listener. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Hurt Locker Pod.